Gods, aliens, kaijus, and superheroes. Yep, this is definitely a Trigger anime series. Gridman goes sky high in another awesome episode of SSSS.GRIDMAN, an episode which channels a lot of the energy of the original Gridman tokusatsu series, as well as superhuman samurai Syber-Squad. This episode also makes it painfully clear to everyone that Akane Shinjo, yes, is indeed the main villain of the series, and yet still at the same time, she has the ability to create all of these giant monsters and destroy everyone, and she seems to like taking her time with it. Does she want to kill Yuta? Does she want to sleep with the dude? What is her overall plan here? Does she just sort of wake up and have a certain mood every single day? You know what? Today, I'm not going to kill people with giant, ridiculous, rubber-suited monsters. She wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. Guess what? Godzilla's coming to town, bitches! Akane is a god, and she's not afraid to abuse her power. But most of this episode was basically just an excuse to introduce Sky Gridman, which is what happens when Gridman actually combines with this giant jet, transforming into a massive superhero robot of extreme awesomeness. And he needs this because he's going to be going up against a giant flying alien. Yep, there's aliens in the show now. You shouldn't be surprised. For as simple as Gridman can be, it's also kind of ridiculous and confusing at times, but if you start to overthink it, you're probably not going to enjoy the show. What is still great is that despite the fact that the show can go into some pretty dark territory and be atmospherically kind of creepy, it still has a very fantastic sense of humor. This is a consistently funny series, and this episode is no exception right here. Really, it's just watching the three main characters interact, which I still think is the funniest thing, of Yuta, Rika, and Utsumi. I love it because Rika just does not look enthused at all to be in this anime show at all. There's all this crazy shit going on around her with giant monsters and superheroes and aliens, and most of the time, she's just on her damn phone. Isn't that just like a teenage girl? And then there's Utsumi, who I'm fully convinced realizes that he's actually in an anime series and actually knows that they're in some sort of Ultraman universe. He always makes jokes about it and everybody just looks at him like he's weird, but he really knows what's going on here. They should really let this guy make all the calls. And then there's Yuta, who's kind of like the very typical protagonist of the show, the reluctant hero, who doesn't know anything conveniently and always gets dragged into a lot of ridiculous situations, like when he returns home and suddenly Akane Shinjo's hanging out on his bed. And because he's the main male protagonist in an anime series, when a woman decides to throw herself at him, he manages to deny her. The scene, however, is incredibly uncomfortable and very disturbing, as Akane manages to basically display herself on Yuta's bed, trying to get some information out of him, and even offering to allow him to join her in her ranks to be gods and conquer this world with all sorts of giant monsters. Yuta, being the protagonist, of course, doesn't want to do anything that could potentially threaten his friends or even have them ended up getting erased, so he doesn't want to go along with this girl's crazy plan. Akane desperately tries to convince him by taking him to the Chinese restaurant, which is actually owned by that one guy whose daughter was erased by Akane, so her actually deciding to bring him to the restaurant is pretty fucked up when you think about it, and she brings him here to introduce him to Alexis Carob, who is the true villain of the series, who may or may not be an alien. All I know is I really wish that this was like Superhuman Samurai Syber-Squad, where he was voiced by Tim Curry. That would amplify everything. And while Alexis is a very flashy and crazy villain, I mean, just look at him. He's a giant robot whose head is on fire. He still manages to have a great sense of humor, as just watching him hang out with these two kids in a Chinese restaurant is surreal as fuck. It's also really freaking funny, but suddenly a kaiju starts to attack, and this kaiju was not created by Akane. In fact, it was actually created by Anti. It's actually this weird regenerating UFO, which is being piloted almost like a puppeteer by a giant alien in the sky. God, this show is fucking weird. Now, you would think watching a giant superhero fight against the UFO would be boring, but no, this is a Trigger anime series. They still managed to make that really entertaining, as this thing darts around like a freaking lance, constantly plowing into him and almost knocking the shit out of him. It's really fast, it's really fluid, but it's when they finally get to see Sky Gridman that things get really fun. The transformation is exactly what you'd expect from the previous ones. They go through the entire freaking Sailor Moon-esque sequence of seeing him transform and go through the big big pose, and it's awesome. But I love this form of Gridman as he's able to fly around in the sky. Anti, of course, being anti-Gridman, is able to sort of copy these abilities, allowing his giant kaiju form to fly around as they battle against him, another alien, and they're all up in the sky with this giant sky city. Yes, they actually travel outside the city for the very first time, and we get to see that there's this giant upside-down city, almost like a ceiling in the sky, and it looks like the weird cyberspace world that originated from the original Gridman show and Superhuman Samurai Syber-Squad. I think it goes without saying that the action scene is fast, fluid, explosive, and all sorts of awesome, especially when Gridman actually separates from the jet and they're able to fight independently of one another. Gridman uses this like giant sword-slicing attack on this alien, killing it in midair in a giant explosion that is just awesome. You know a series is good when they can show you something that you've seen like a billion times, but still manage to actually amp you up. The episode ends with Alexis realizing that the only way to take down Gridman is going to use Akane. She's the only one who can truly create super-powered kaiju. I feel as if Alexis was actually trying to sort of manipulate Akane in this episode to drive her further more insane and to make her even crazier to further whatever his weird, mysterious-ass goal is. So what's the rundown on this episode of Gridman? While I really did like this episode, I take issue with a lot of parts of it. Most of the first half of the episode is played for laughs when Yuta is trying to tell his friends that he met this kaiju girl who told him that Akane is a god and aliens are involved, and for some odd reason they don't seem to believe him, as if this sort of weird shit never actually happens. There's giant robots fighting against rubber-suited monsters almost every day in the city, and they don't believe any of this stuff? I find that hard to believe. But a lot of that is actually played to the humor of this show, and I'm fully convinced that even though this is a big action show that has some surprising dark moments attached to it, that Gridman is essentially just a giant comedy series. It's really fun to watch, and I find myself laughing more often than I actually should. A lot of the comedic timing of the show just absolutely works, and they even take one of my most hated things, which is taking a joke and stretching it out too thin, and they actually manage to make it funny. The guy who actually transforms into the jet and combines with Gridman, his character is very deadpan and doesn't seem to be aware of the things that are going on around him, and when they suggest that he's the one who goes into battle, there's this moment where they're all just sort of in a stunned silence staring at him as they realize collectively that he has no idea what they're talking about. There's no dialogue, there's no noise, there's no nothing, and it goes on for like a solid 10 to 15 seconds, and these type of jokes can go into Conway Twitty territory where they end up not being funny. Somehow, it works here. I just thought that that was really damn good. And I think it goes without saying that all of the action scenes in the episode are great, but a lot of this episode right here is heavily reliant on the scenes between Akane and Yuta. They manage to be incredibly atmospheric and scary as you're sort of waiting for that moment where Akane is going to reveal a more terrifying side of her personality, but she manages to keep her cool the entire time. She's well aware of her power and knowing what she's truly capable of, that she honestly has nothing to fear in this world. As a god, she can do anything, and that comes across as very disturbing. She's honestly one of the more intriguing villains that I've ever seen, despite the fact that she comes across as very stock, although it's very obvious that she is being manipulated by Alexis, which again, like I said, don't know why that's going down, but I'm glad we get to see more of Alexis as the series goes on, as his design is just so over the top and crazy. I wonder if the guy at the Chinese restaurant could actually see him, or if he was actually just invisible to him the entire time. If he could see him, how is he not commenting on this guy's ridiculous look? His head is on fire. He's like freaking James Wood Hades. In fact, yes, that is exactly who he is. He is Mecha James Wood Hades. So let's just go ahead and wrap this one up. Another crazy episode of Gridman, which delivered heavily on the action and the amazing characterization from the show, giving us a very deep and surprisingly complex world, which is still slowly unraveling for the viewer. It's good stuff. It's not the best Trigger anime that I've ever seen, but it's entertaining as all hell, and I think that's at least worth saying. So I'm giving this episode a 4 out of 5. I would love to hear all of your thoughts about it if you guys did watch it. Tell me all of them in the comment section below. Your thoughts, your theories on what is going to be happening as we get this much closer to the end of SSSS.GRIDMAN. Thank you guys for watching this review. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down there, baby.